This isn't just a story I heard. This is something that actually happened to me, a pivotal moment in my life that still feels as fresh as yesterday's headlines. The memory of it, sharp and clear, often plays in my mind, a constant reminder of how far I've come and the lengths I went to get there. The laughter, a cacophony of condescending chuckles and outright guffaws, echoed through the rented banquet hall of the Grand Willow in Pasadena, California, when my Aunt Carol, her face a mask of faux concern, announced to the entire family reunion that I was still just doing that little online thing. My new Tesla, a sleek Obsidian Model S, sat gleaming in the parking lot, an expensive, silent witness to the collective dismissal of my worth, parked just out of sight from the window where my cousin Mark was still pointing and snickering, oblivious to the storm he was about to unleash. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. My journey to that Pasadena banquet hall, and more specifically, to that Tesla, began years earlier in a much smaller, far less glamorous setting, my cramped apartment in Koreatown, Los Angeles. For as long as I could remember, my family had operated under a very specific, unspoken hierarchy, a pecking order based almost entirely on traditional and respectable careers. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, those were the golden children, accountants, teachers, even successful real estate agents, they held a comfortable middle ground. And then there was me, Amelia Thorne, the black sheep who dared to venture into the uncharted, often misunderstood territory of online entrepreneurship. My little online thing, as Aunt Carol so dismissively put it, was actually a rapidly growing e-commerce business specializing in ethically sourced, artisanal home goods. It was my passion, my brainchild, and for years it had been the sole focus of my waking hours. I'd poured every ounce of my savings, every late night, every canceled social event into it. I'd navigated the labyrinthine world of online marketing, supply chain logistics, and customer service, learning on the fly, making mistakes, and celebrating every small victory with a quiet intensity that only true entrepreneurs understand. But to my family, especially my mother's side, the Thompsons, it was just a hobby, a phase, something I'd eventually grow out of and get a real job. The Thompson family reunions were annual exercises in subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, social stratification. Everyone would gather, ostentatiously displaying their latest professional achievements, their children's Ivy League acceptances, or their new luxury cars. It was a thinly veiled competition, a performance of success where I always seemed to be cast in the role of the underachiever. My cousin, Mark Thompson, was the undisputed king of this particular hill. He was a corporate lawyer, sharp-suited and sharper-tongued, with a booming laugh that could fill a room and an ego to match. Mark had always reveled in making me feel small, starting from childhood when he'd ridicule my handmade art projects compared to his perfectly rendered science fair models. As adults, his jabs became more sophisticated, more insidious. He'd ask leading questions about my business, his eyes glinting with amusement as I tried to explain the complexities of digital marketing to a room full of people who still thought the internet was a fad. "So you just sell things online, Amelia? Like out of your apartment?" he'd ask, feigning genuine curiosity, but his tone dripping with condescension. The laughter that followed, the one I just described at the reunion, was almost always initiated by Mark. He thrived on it, on the collective validation of his own perceived superiority. That year, however, something felt different. My business had finally turned a significant corner. After years of grinding, of sacrificing, of doubting, it had exploded. A viral social media campaign, a lucrative partnership with a well-known influencer, and a surge in demand for ethical consumerism had propelled Aurelia Goods from a small niche operation to a thriving, recognizable brand. I was no longer just making ends meet. I was genuinely, undeniably successful. My bank account reflected it, and more importantly, my confidence soared. I had bought the Tesla a few weeks prior, a silent declaration of my independence and success, a tangible symbol of all those sleepless nights and relentless effort. I hadn't planned to use it as a weapon, not really. It was simply my new car. But as I stood there, enduring the familiar sting of their dismissive laughter, a cold, hard resolve began to crystallize within me. The memory of every slight, every patronizing smile, every whispered comment about my unconventional choices flooded my mind. Mark's particularly loud snicker, amplified by Aunt Carol's performative pity, was the final straw. I felt a switch flip inside me, a dormant fire igniting. They wanted to laugh at my job? Fine, but they wouldn't be laughing for long. The sweet hum of the Tesla's electric motor, a sound I had come to love, suddenly transformed into a silent, potent promise of retribution. The initial sting of the laughter at the reunion was a familiar ache, one I had grown accustomed to over the years. But this time it was different. It wasn't just humiliation, it was a profound sense of injustice. They had no idea, absolutely no clue, of the sheer grit and sacrifice that had gone into building Aurelia Goods. They saw a girl with a laptop and a hobby, not a savvy businesswoman who had bootstrapped her way from nothing to a multimillion-dollar enterprise. My cousin Mark, in particular, seemed to take immense pleasure in my supposed failures. He had always been the golden boy, the one who effortlessly excelled in traditional metrics of success. From his early days as a star athlete to his prestigious law degree and subsequent high-flying corporate career, Mark had always been held up as the paragon of achievement in our family. His life was a meticulously curated highlight reel of accomplishments, each one designed to cast a shadow on anyone who dared to diverge from the established path. My online thing was, to him, a personal affront, a challenge to the very foundation of his worldview, where success was measured in corner offices and six-figure salaries from established firms. After Aunt Carol's announcement and the ensuing mirth, I retreated to a quiet corner, feigning interest in a potted palm, but my ears were sharply attuned to the conversations swirling around me. It didn't take long for Mark to corner me, his smile wide and disingenuous. "So, Amelia," he began, his voice just loud enough for a few nearby relatives to hear, "still selling those unique candles and woven baskets? How's the hustle going? Making enough to pay the rent this month?" He winked conspiratorially at our Uncle David, who chuckled on cue. The insinuation was clear. I was struggling, barely scraping by, and definitely not on their level. I felt a surge of indignation, a hot flush spreading across my cheeks. But this time, I held my tongue. I had learned, through years of dealing with Mark, that engaging him in a public debate was futile. He was a master of rhetorical judo, twisting words and painting me as the defensive, overly sensitive one. Instead, I simply offered a tight, polite smile and said, "It's going well, Mark. Very well." His smile faltered slightly, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes, but he quickly recovered, dismissing my vague response with a shrug. The rest of the reunion was a blur of forced smiles and strained conversations. I watched as Mark regaled various family members with tales of his latest legal victories, his voice booming, his chest puffed out. He even made a point of mentioning his brand-new Mercedes S-Class, parked prominently in the hotel's valet section. "Just for convenience, you know." It was a subtle, yet unmistakable jab. Everyone knew I drove an older, perfectly functional but unremarkable sedan. The message was clear. Mark was successful. I was not. He was the epitome of traditional wealth and power, while I was still playing in the digital sandbox. As the reunion wound down, I started making my excuses, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of judgment and veiled insults. But before I could slip away, Aunt Carol cornered me again, her expression a caricature of sympathy. "Amelia, dear," she cooed, placing a hand on my arm. "Your mother tells me you're still living in that small apartment. Have you considered getting a more stable job? Something with benefits? It's just, you're not getting any younger, and a woman needs security." Her words, delivered with a saccharine smile, felt like 1,000 tiny needles piercing my skin. It wasn't just about my career. It was about my entire life, my choices, my worth as a woman in their eyes. That night, as I drove home in the blissful silence of my Tesla, the cool night air of Pasadena washing over me, the indignation of the day slowly transmuted into a steely resolve. The humiliation had been real, palpable, but it had also been a catalyst. I replayed every condescending comment, every dismissive glance, every patronizing smile. And then I pictured Mark's smug face, Aunt Carol's pitying gaze, Uncle David's knowing chuckle. It wasn't just about them laughing at my job. It was about them laughing at me, at my dreams, at my unconventional path. It was about them trying to confine me to their narrow, outdated definition of success. But something inside me had shifted. The Amelia who used to shrink under their scrutiny was gone. In her place was a woman who had built something from nothing, who had defied expectations and carved her own path. And that woman was tired of being underestimated. The silence of the Tesla, usually so soothing, now felt charged with a potent energy, a quiet hum of burgeoning intent. I had bought this car as a reward for myself, a personal milestone. But now, it felt like something more. It felt like a promise that the next time the Thompsons gathered, their laughter would be replaced by something entirely different. I didn't know how yet, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I would make them see. I would make them understand. And Mark, especially Mark, would regret every single snide remark he had ever uttered. The game, I realized, was officially on. The weeks following the reunion were a strange blend of furious determination and quiet strategizing. The laughter still echoed in my ears, but now it fueled me rather than diminished me. I threw myself even deeper into Aurelia Goods, not out of desperation, but out of a burning desire to solidify my success beyond any doubt. I expanded product lines, refined my marketing strategies, and even began exploring international shipping. The numbers soared, and with each new milestone, a quiet satisfaction settled over me. Yet, beneath the surface, the seed of revenge, planted by Mark's smug dismissal, was slowly germinating. It wasn't a malicious, destructive urge, not really. It was more about proving them wrong, about shattering their preconceived notions of who I was and what I was capable of. It was about reclaiming my narrative. My first real inkling that something more insidious might be at play came not from Mark directly, but from a series of subtle, unsettling occurrences. Aurelia Goods, being an online business, was heavily reliant on its digital presence. Suddenly, I started noticing strange anomalies. My website traffic, which had been steadily climbing, experienced unexplained dips. My social media reach, usually robust, seemed to plateau or even slightly decline, despite my consistent efforts and engaging content. At first, I dismissed it as algorithmic quirks, a bad week, or perhaps a new competitor. But the pattern persisted, a faint dissonant note in the symphony of my otherwise booming success. I spent countless hours poring over analytics, cross-referencing data, and scrutinizing every metric. Nothing concrete emerged, no smoking gun, just a vague sense of unease. It felt like walking through a fog, knowing there was something just beyond my sight, but unable to pinpoint it. The suspicion deepened when I received a few vaguely negative, yet highly specific comments on my product reviews that seemed to focus on aspects of my business that were usually lauded, like my ethical sourcing or my unique designs. They were well-written, articulate, and almost too precise in their criticisms, lacking the usual emotional outpouring of a genuinely dissatisfied customer. They felt calculated, It was a gut feeling, an entrepreneur's intuition honed by years of navigating the capricious currents of online commerce. I started to wonder if someone was actively trying to undermine me. But who? And why? My mind, of course, immediately went to Mark. He had the means, the motive, in his twisted worldview at least, and the inherent vindictiveness to orchestrate such a campaign. But it was just a suspicion, a nagging doubt without any tangible evidence. I couldn't accuse him based on a gut feeling and a few peculiar comments. Not yet. Then came the email. It was a seemingly innocuous forwarded message from a distant cousin, a mass email about an upcoming family event, but buried within the header information, a small detail caught my eye. The email address it had been forwarded from was not my cousin's usual one, but an obscure, unfamiliar address that seemed to share a remarkably similar string of characters to an email I had briefly used for a particular, highly sensitive business negotiation a few months prior. A negotiation that had, mysteriously, fallen through at the last minute, costing me a significant partnership. I had always suspected foul play then too, but again, had no proof. Now, a cold dread began to creep in. I wasn't just being mocked, I was being sabotaged. My fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the digital breadcrumbs. It was a painstaking, tedious process, requiring a deep dive into server logs, IP addresses, and digital footprints, areas that were beyond my usual purview, but not beyond my capability to research and understand. I spent days, then weeks, burning the midnight oil, meticulously gathering every scrap of data. It was like piecing together a complex jigsaw puzzle, each fragment revealing a tiny bit more of the sinister picture. What I uncovered was far more elaborate and insidious than I could have imagined. Mark, it turned out, wasn't just a corporate lawyer. He was also a master manipulator with a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of digital subterfuge. He had, through a series of anonymous proxies and burner accounts, been systematically orchestrating a targeted campaign against Aurelia Goods. He'd hired a small team of freelancers on the dark web to generate negative reviews, to flood my social media with spam, and even to launch minor DDoS attacks on my website during peak traffic hours. He'd also, to my utter horror, been intercepting and redirecting some of my crucial business emails, causing communication breakdowns and derailing potential partnerships. The email address coincidence wasn't a coincidence at all. It was a deliberate, subtle probe, a test of my vigilance, a cruel reminder of his reach. The full extent of his treachery hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just about mocking my job. It was about actively trying to destroy it, to erase my success, to prove his superiority by crushing mine. He hadn't just laughed at me, he had tried to silence me. The realization was both devastating and galvanizing. The vague unease transformed into a furious resolve. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a clear, horrifying image of his malice. This wasn't just about a family feud anymore. This was a war. And I, Amelia Thorne, was ready to fight back. My Tesla, parked quietly outside my apartment, now felt like a war machine, sleek and silent, waiting for its command. The more I uncovered, the more terrifyingly clear it became. Mark was not just an arrogant relative, he was a formidable opponent. His network, his resources, his sheer cunning seemed to stretch further than I could have ever imagined. He truly appeared untouchable, operating with an almost brazen impunity. He wasn't just a corporate lawyer, he was a strategic combatant, and I, a self-taught entrepreneur, felt like a David facing Goliath. The sheer scale of his operation against Aurelia Goods was chilling. He had leveraged his connections, his understanding of legal loopholes, and his significant financial resources to create a web of digital sabotage that was almost impossible to trace back to him directly. He'd paid for sophisticated bots to swamp my customer service channels, tying up my small team with spurious inquiries. He'd commissioned articles on obscure, but seemingly legitimate industry blogs subtly questioning the true origins of my ethically sourced materials, sowing seeds of doubt among my most loyal customers. These weren't overt attacks. They were subtle, insidious whispers designed to erode trust and slowly, inexorably dismantle my brand from the inside out. He moved with an air of complete invincibility, his confidence radiating from every interaction, every social media post, every casual mention of his latest achievement. He'd recently been featured in a prominent legal magazine, lauded for his aggressive, no-holds-barred approach to corporate litigation. The article painted him as a ruthless champion for his clients, a man who always got what he wanted. To me, reading it felt like a thinly veiled threat, a boast designed to underscore his power and my vulnerability. He even made a point of posting pictures of his opulent new penthouse in downtown LA, complete with panoramic views and a private chef, further cementing his image as the ultimate victor in the game of life. Each post was a subtle reminder. He was living large, thriving, while he believed I was floundering. He believed he was winning, and that belief fueled his arrogance, making him even more insufferable, more dangerous. The fear, I admit, was real. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the room, the weight of his machinations pressing down on me. What if he succeeded? What if all my hard work, all my dreams, were irrevocably shattered by his petty vendetta? The thought was paralyzing. I saw my small team, the people who had believed in me, who had poured their own passion into Aurelia Goods, and the idea of letting them down, of seeing their hopes crushed, was almost unbearable. I felt isolated, alone in this battle against a seemingly omnipotent foe. Who would believe me if I tried to explain? He was a respected lawyer, a pillar of the community, while I was just doing that little online thing. His word, his reputation, would always outweigh mine in the eyes of most. Adding to the overwhelming sense of his power was his uncanny ability to anticipate my moves. It was as if he knew what I was thinking, what I was planning, before I even fully formed the thought. A new marketing campaign I'd been developing would suddenly be met with a barrage of negative comments or a suspiciously similar yet subtly superior campaign from a competitor. A potential supplier I was courting would mysteriously become unresponsive. It was too consistent to be coincidence. He had spies, I realized, or perhaps he had simply perfected the art of observing, predicting, and preempting. His arrogance wasn't just a personality trait, it was a weapon, a shield that deflected any notion of his culpability. He was so convinced of his own untouchability that he left subtle clues, digital breadcrumbs, that only someone as intimately familiar with his modus operandi as I was becoming could pick up. He had grown complacent in his power, confident that no one would ever dare to challenge him, much less succeed. This feeling of being outmaneuvered, of fighting a ghost in the machine, was soul-crushing. I started to second-guess myself, to doubt my own instincts, to wonder if I was simply paranoid. His ability to maintain this facade of respectability while simultaneously orchestrating a campaign of digital terrorism was truly terrifying. It showcased a level of cold, calculated malice that was far beyond mere family rivalry. This wasn't just about proving a point, it was about control, about dominance, about extinguishing any light that dared to shine brighter than his own. But even amidst the fear, a tiny ember of defiance flickered within me. He might have the power, the connections, the reputation, but I had something he didn't. An unshakable belief in what I was doing, and a growing, potent anger that was slowly transforming into an iron will. I knew, deep down, that I couldn't let him win. Not for me, not for Aurelia Goods, and certainly not for every other person he had likely trampled on his relentless climb to the top. The game might be stacked against me, but I was about to change the rules. The turning point wasn't a sudden explosion of anger, but a quiet, almost imperceptible shift, like the tectonic plates of my resolve grinding into a new alignment. It happened late one night, a few weeks after the full scope of Mark's sabotage had become terrifyingly clear. I was sitting at my kitchen table, a mountain of server logs and legal documents spread out before me, the remnants of a cold pizza, my only companion. The apartment was silent save for the hum of my laptop and the distant, familiar drone of Los Angeles traffic. I had just finished reading an email from a potential investor, a promising lead that had suddenly gone cold, the phrasing eerily similar to other opportunities that had mysteriously vanished. The frustration, the exhaustion, the sheer weight of it all pressed down on me. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and for a moment I considered giving up. The thought, cold and seductive, whispered in my ear, "Just walk away, Amelia. It's not worth it. He's too powerful. You'll lose everything." But then an image flashed into my mind. Aunt Carol's pitying smile, Mark's sneering face, the collective laughter echoing in the banquet hall. And intertwined with that image was another. The countless hours I'd poured into Aurelia Goods, the joy of seeing my vision come to life, the testimonials from satisfied customers whose lives my products had genuinely touched. I remembered the exhilarating rush of that first big sale, the pride of hiring my first employee, the quiet satisfaction of building something meaningful from the ground up. This wasn't just a business, it was a part of me, a testament to my resilience and creativity. To let Mark destroy it would be to let him destroy a part of myself. My eyes snapped open. The fear was still there, a faint tremor beneath my skin, but it was now overshadowed by a far more potent emotion, a white-hot, unwavering resolve. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. It was about standing up for myself, for my work, for everyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed. I wasn't just a victim of Mark's malice, I was a fighter, and I was done playing defense. The whispers of doubt were silenced, replaced by a fierce, determined mantra. He will not win. I will not let him win. That night, something profound shifted. The vulnerability I had felt, the paralysis of fear, began to recede, replaced by a sharp clarity of purpose. I wasn't going to just expose Mark. I was going to systematically dismantle his carefully constructed empire of lies and arrogance. I wasn't going to just recover. I was going to thrive, and I was going to do it in a way that would leave no doubt about his culpability. The emotional turning point felt less like a roar and more like a quiet, internal click, the sound of a lock engaging, sealing my decision. I stood up from the table, my posture straighter, my jaw set. The cold pizza no longer held any appeal. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, took a long, steady sip, and returned to my laptop. But this time my approach was different. I wasn't just tracking his sabotage, I was building a case, a meticulously detailed, unassailable case. My revenge plan wasn't going to be a reckless, impulsive act. It was going to be an elegant, calculated strategy, a chess game played with digital footprints and legal precedents. I started by organizing all the data I had painstakingly collected, screenshots of suspicious comments, IP addresses linked to his proxies, email headers revealing diversions, and financial records showing payments to the freelancers he'd hired. Each piece of evidence, once scattered and seemingly disconnected, now became a vital component of a coherent, damning narrative. I also began to leverage my own network, albeit discreetly. I reached out to a trusted cybersecurity expert I knew through an online forum, framing my request as a hypothetical scenario for a friend. He provided invaluable insights into forensic digital analysis, helping me uncover deeper layers of Mark's digital deception. I consulted with a former law school classmate, now a successful litigation attorney, again, using a hypothetical to understand the legal ramifications of digital harassment and business interference. She confirmed my suspicions. Mark was treading a very dangerous line, skirting federal laws regarding cyberstalking and economic espionage. The resolve wasn't just about anger, it was about precision. I realized that my strength lay not in matching his brute force, but in exposing his hidden vulnerabilities. He might be powerful, but he was also arrogant, and arrogance often leads to oversight. My plan wasn't about public shaming, not yet. It was about methodical, undeniable proof that would stand up in a court of law, and more importantly, in the court of public opinion within our family. The Tesla, a symbol of my hard-won success, now became a symbol of my impending victory. It wasn't just a car, it was a chariot of vengeance, sleek, silent, and immensely powerful. My transformation was complete. The vulnerable entrepreneur was gone, replaced by a relentless strategist, a woman utterly determined to not just survive, but to utterly triumph. The game was no longer just on. It was about to reach its terrifying, exhilarating climax. The war began not with a bang, but with a series of almost imperceptible tremors designed to destabilize Mark's carefully constructed world. My strategy was multi-pronged, leveraging both digital forensics and legal maneuvers, all executed with surgical precision. I knew I couldn't just storm his castle. I had to undermine its foundations, brick by painstaking brick. First, I focused on neutralizing his digital attacks. With the help of my cybersecurity contact, I implemented advanced monitoring systems on my website and social media channels. We were able to identify and block the bot networks he was using, trace the origins of the negative reviews to specific IP addresses, which through further investigation, we linked to known proxies he employed, and restore full control over my email communications. The immediate effect was a noticeable uptick in my website traffic and engagement. It was a small victory, but a significant one, a clear indication that I was no longer a passive target. This, I knew, would infuriate him, but he wouldn't know why or how. He would just see his efforts failing, and that alone would begin to unravel his composure. Next, I started laying traps. Knowing his penchant for subtle sabotage and his belief in his own untouchability, I decided to bait him. I deliberately leaked information about a fictitious major expansion of Aurelia goods into a new, highly specialized market, a market that, coincidentally, intersected with a niche area of corporate law where Mark was trying to build his own expertise. I created dummy emails, set up decoy social media accounts, and even fabricated conversations with non-existent partners, all designed to appear legitimate to anyone actively snooping. The bait was taken almost immediately. Within days, I started seeing the familiar patterns of his interference in this fabricated venture. New, targeted negative comments appearing on related industry forums, seemingly innocuous tips being sent to my decoy accounts, designed to steer me away from the profitable direction. Each instance was meticulously documented, time-stamped, and linked back to his known digital fingerprints. He was walking directly into every snare I laid. While the digital skirmishes were ongoing, I was simultaneously working on the legal front. My litigation attorney contact, now fully aware of the situation, though I still maintained a degree of anonymity to protect my sources, helped me draft a series of cease and desist letters. These weren't sent to Mark directly, but to the various freelance platforms and obscure digital services he was using. The letters, backed by a mountain of evidence, accused these platforms of facilitating illegal cyber harassment and business interference, threatening severe legal repercussions if they didn't immediately cooperate in identifying the orchestrator. The effect was almost instantaneous. These platforms, eager to avoid lengthy and costly legal battles, began to cooperate. User accounts linked to Mark's proxies were shut down, and in some cases, IP logs and transaction histories were quietly forwarded to my attorney. The walls were slowly closing in. The most satisfying part of the escalation was watching Mark's arrogance slowly curdle into frustration, then panic. He didn't know I was behind it, of course. From his perspective, his brilliant schemes were simply failing. He'd double down, launch more aggressive attacks, only to find them swiftly neutralized. He'd grow more reckless, more careless in his attempts to cover his tracks. One particular incident stands out. I had deliberately planted a false rumor about a major competitor attempting a hostile takeover of Aurelia goods. Within hours, Mark, unable to resist meddling, used one of his burner accounts to warn a prominent industry blogger about the supposed takeover, attempting to frame it as a scandalous, unethical move by the competitor. He made a crucial mistake. In his haste, he recycled an old, slightly less masked proxy server that I had already identified as one of his. The evidence was irrefutable. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph, a direct hit. The confrontation with Mark wasn't a shouting match. It was a quiet, almost chilling dissection of his character. I arranged a meeting, ostensibly to discuss a family matter, choosing a neutral, public location, a quiet, upscale cafe in Beverly Hills, the kind of place where hushed conversations are the norm. He arrived radiating his usual self-importance, oblivious to the storm about to break. He even managed a condescending smile. "Amelia," he said, taking a sip of his overpriced espresso, "to what do I owe the pleasure? Decided to finally get some sensible legal advice for your little venture." I simply placed a thick manila folder on the table between us. Inside were printouts of all my meticulously gathered evidence, screenshots, IP logs, email headers, financial transaction records, even anonymous witness statements from freelancers he had stiffed. The top document was a detailed summary, clearly outlining his systematic campaign of cyber harassment and economic interference against Aurelia goods, complete with dates, times, and estimated financial damages. His smug expression slowly began to crack as he leafed through the documents. His eyes, usually so confident, darted across the pages, searching for a flaw, a loophole, anything to dismiss it. But there was nothing. It was all there, undeniable, irrefutable. The color drained from his face, replaced by a pale, sickly green. "What is this, Amelia?" he stammered, his voice losing its usual booming resonance, shrinking to a thin, reedy whisper. "Some kind of joke? You think you can blackmail me?" I met his gaze, my own eyes cold and unwavering. "No, Mark," I said, my voice calm, steady, and utterly devoid of emotion. "This is a statement that will be going to the district attorney's office, the state bar, and every single one of your firm's major clients unless you agree to my terms." He looked utterly broken, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. He finally understood. The tables had not just turned, they had been completely overturned. The hunter had become the hunted, and I, Amelia Thorne, was holding all the cards. The revenge payoff, when it finally arrived, wasn't a dramatic explosion of public outcry or a sensational courtroom battle. It was something far more subtle, more devastating, and ultimately far more satisfying in its quiet, methodical destruction of Mark's world. It was a slow, agonizing unraveling, meticulously orchestrated to hit him where it hurt the most: his reputation, his career, and his financial standing. After our confrontation in the cafe, Mark, seeing the undeniable mountain of evidence I possessed, tried to bluff, to negotiate, to mitigate the damage. He offered me a paltry settlement, a thinly veiled attempt to buy my silence. I refused. My terms were non-negotiable: a public formal apology, a significant financial restitution to Aurelia goods for damages incurred, and a complete, verifiable withdrawal from all digital platforms he used for his nefarious activities. Most importantly, I demanded his resignation from his prestigious law firm. He scoffed at the last demand, incredulous. "You can't be serious, Amelia. That's my career, my life." "It was also my career, my life, you were trying to destroy, Mark," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "And unlike you, I built mine with integrity." When he realized I wouldn't budge, the panic set in. He knew the potential fallout if I went public. The evidence I had was not just enough for a civil suit. It implicated him in serious professional misconduct and potentially criminal activity. A lawyer, an officer of the court, engaging in cyberstalking and economic espionage? It would be a career-ending scandal. His firm, a bastion of corporate respectability, would disassociate themselves from him faster than he could say malpractice. His reputation, the very foundation of his inflated ego, would be shattered. He finally grudgingly agreed. The public apology was, predictably, a carefully worded anemic statement released through his lawyer, attributing his misguided actions to personal stress. But it was enough. It was a public acknowledgement of his wrongdoing, however sanitized. The financial restitution was substantial, enough to not only cover all the damages and legal fees, but also to inject a significant boost into Aurelia Goods' expansion plans, and his resignation? That was the pièce de résistance. It wasn't announced with fanfare, but a quiet, internal memo circulated through his firm, citing personal reasons for his departure. But whispers travel fast in the legal world, and coupled with the anonymous tips I subtly ensured reached key figures, the real story quickly emerged. He wasn't just gone, he was disgraced. The true payoff, however, came not from the official channels, but from the ripple effect within our family and his professional circle. News of his departure and the vague rumors surrounding it spread like wildfire. The same relatives who had laughed at me, who had worshipped at the altar of Mark's success, now looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. Aunt Carol, who had initiated the initial humiliation, now averted her gaze whenever his name came up. Uncle David, who had chuckled at Mark's jokes, now offered me hesitant, almost apologetic smiles. The hierarchy, once so firmly established, had been utterly upended. Mark, the golden boy, was now tainted, his once invincible aura shattered. He tried to rebuild, to find another position, but the whispers followed him. His aggressive reputation, once a source of pride, now became a liability. No reputable firm wanted to touch a lawyer with a cloud of cyber shenanigans and ethical misconduct hanging over their head. His star had not just fallen, it had crashed and burned, leaving only ashes. The most profound part of the revenge was the internal shift it wrought in me. It wasn't just about Mark's downfall, it was about my own ascent. The experience had forged me, tempered me into a formidable force. Aurelia Goods, unburdened by his sabotage, flourished beyond my wildest dreams. The financial injection allowed for massive expansion, opening new markets, hiring more staff, and launching innovative product lines. I wasn't just a successful entrepreneur, I was a proven survivor, a strategist who had faced down a powerful adversary and emerged victorious. The Tesla, once a quiet symbol of my personal success, now felt like a silent, gleaming monument to my triumph. It was a physical manifestation of my journey, from the cramped apartment in Koreatown to the helm of a thriving enterprise, having navigated a treacherous landscape of betrayal and sabotage. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet and the hum of my own thoughts is the loudest sound, I think about Mark. I picture him, not in his opulent penthouse, but in a much smaller, less impressive office, struggling to regain a fraction of the respect he so carelessly squandered. And I feel nothing. Not triumph, not pity, just a quiet, profound emptiness. Because in the end, the revenge wasn't about him at all. It was about me. It was about reclaiming my narrative, proving my worth, and understanding that true power comes not from tearing others down, but from building yourself up, brick by painful, glorious brick. And sometimes, just sometimes, that means taking down those who try to stand in your way. The only sound now, after all these years, is the soft, rhythmic hum of my Tesla's engine as I drive away, a silent testament to the wreckage left behind. The end.